A foul wind coils through the alleyways of York, thick with the rot of death and the rancid sting of boiled tallow. It slithers through broken shutters, under warped doors, curling its fingers into every forgotten corner of the old city. The sky remains low and unmoved, as though weighed down by the prayers it refuses to answer. And beneath that smothering gray, a boy kneels, no older than 12, scraping the waxy fat from a butcher's discarded bones. His nails are black with grime, his lips cracked, his breath clouding in the morning air like the soul of something departing. The church bells toll, not for mass, but for plague. They sound not in celebration, but in surrender. Behind the boy, a red X has been smeared onto a nearby cottage, its paint still wet and glistening. Inside, his mother coughs blood into the folds of a linen rag. Once her voice filled their cottage with song, lullabies sung in the old tongue, prayers whispered by heartlight. Now she groans in her sleep, her eyes glassy and distant, her skin yellowed like old parchment. He dares not enter any more. The priest has ceased his visits. The neighbors mutter behind thin wooden doors, offering no bread, no balm, only the cruel mercy of distance. He leaves a bowl of barley soaked in weak ale on the doorstep. It trembles in his hands as he places it down, not from the cold, but from something deeper, older, fear, or perhaps a kind of knowing that has no name. Outside, the world freezes in silence. Thatched roofs glisten with frost, wooden pails split where ice has crept into their grain, and the boy's feet, bound in linen scraps, squelch in the slurry of sewage and snow. He hears it before he sees it, the groaning of cart wheels over cobblestone. A funeral passes. The third today. He watches from the alley's mouth, silent. On the cart, the bodies are stacked like firewood, wrapped in cloth, some not even that. One of them wears a brooch shaped like a stag. His mother's brooch. He stares at it. A crow lands on the edge of the cart, bold, pecking at a hand that still clutches something unseen. He does not cry. Instead, he follows. Step after step, his bare heels kissing stone. The boy follows the rhythm of death, because death has rhythm now. A pattern, a call, a lullaby, louder than his mother's voice ever was. Down the hill, the cart creaks toward the plague pit, a hollowed field where the ground gapes like a starving mouth. Men with cloth over their faces toss the dead into the earth, murmuring rote prayers that have long since lost their meaning. The crow hops closer, the wind changes, and with it comes the sting of lie, of rot, of something older than disease, the smell of abandonment. The boy stands at the edge, the snow melting beneath his feet. He is not yet dead, but he is no longer a child, and still the city moves around him. Somewhere beyond, in the richer quarters, there is warmth, laughter, even, silk curtains drawn tight, merchants hoarding dried fish and candles behind barred windows. Rats run faster here. Fat ones, fast ones. The plague feeds unevenly, but in the alleyways, York is bleeding. Its breath is shallow, its heartbeat faint, and the boy becomes its witness, a silent observer, moving through the ruins of a city that refuses to weep. He learns to listen, to hear the difference between the cough of fever and the choke of final breath, to know which doors are still warm and which are sealed from the inside, to tell when the rats move toward something, or away, and slowly, he stops waiting. He no longer watches the cottage from the alley, he no longer leaves the bowl. One morning, he stands before the door, silent. No sound inside, no groan, no breath, no wind, only the red X faded now, streaked by rain. He presses his hand to the wood, and feels nothing, no heat, no heartbeat. The door does not open, it does not need to. He turns, walks, because the city has more lessons. He learns to trade tallow for crusts of bread, to sleep in the rafters of a barn the plague has not touched. He watches others, children like him, hollowed, quick-fingered, learning the same dance. None of them speak. Words are dangerous. They remind you who you were, and no one wants to remember. He sees a woman light candles for her son, only for the rats to snuff them out. He sees a monk tear pages from a holy book to bandage a wound, and then burn the book entirely. He sees men carry coins in their mouths, hoping death will mistake them for the already buried. And above all, he sees the church, its doors still open, but its silence deeper than any sermon. One night, when the fog has thickened like soup and the stars are gone, he sneaks into the graveyard. Not for theft, not for prayer, he does not know why, only that something pulls him there, the same rhythm that led him from the cart. He finds a statue of a saint, its face eaten by moss, one hand broken. Around it, the earth is soft and sunken. He lies beside it, not to sleep, but to listen. And in that dark silence, something changes, not in the sky, not in the wind. In him. He no longer feels cold. He no longer feels hunger. He no longer feels anything. He is becoming something else, not dead, not alive, a witness, a keeper of memory for those who will not be remembered. When morning comes, he walks to the edge of the river and watches as the mist lifts in tendrils. A boat drifts by, unmanned, its rope cut. A rat scurries across the prow. The city is quieter now. The bells have stopped ringing. The dead are buried, or missed entirely. Turns his back to the water, walks toward the cathedral, and for the first time, steps through its doors. The nave is dark. A single candle flickers beneath a stained glass window shattered by frost. He kneels, not in prayer, but in silence. Because there is no one left to pray to, only the wind, the stone, and the memory of warmth. And from this silence, something new will rise. Not hope, not yet, but endurance. And that is enough to carry him into the next chapter of the plague, into the next chapter of the world. The snow speaks in whispers no man understands. Its silence is not peace, it is judgment. The kind that falls slow and cold, piling over sins and sorrows alike. In the hills above Purchit, winter does not arrive with ceremony. It creeps, white and weightless, into lungs, into marrow, into memory. A woodsman stumbles beneath its silence. His boots crunch through the crust of old snow, each step a prayer and a curse. His sled moans behind him, laden with birch split by shaking hands. The axe he once swung with pride, now trembles in his grip. His fingers, wrapped in wool, are bloodless and bruised. He does not feel them anymore. Only the pain remains, humming like a buried ember deep in the bone. A wolf cries behind the ridge, not close, not far, just enough to remind him that mercy does not live in these woods. His name is Jahan, though no one calls him that anymore. To the village, he is simply the woodcutter. To his daughter, he is Papa. And to the trees, he is a trespasser, stealing warmth one limb at a time. He has not eaten meat in 5 days. The salted hare was given to the child, a girl of 6 winters, lungs weak and ribs sharp, eyes too large for her face. She lies on a straw pallet beside a clay stove that huffs and wheezes like an old dog. The coals have burned down to dust. Her breath rattles. She coughs blood. Jahan sees her face in every drift, pale and slick with fever sweat, eyes fluttering like a moth near death. He whispers prayers, not the ones the priest taught, but older words, Latin twisted through frost-bitten lips, for warmth, for mercy, for a little more time. The wind tears at his hood. A branch snaps under snow-laden weight. Somewhere above, birds scatter, startled or starving, and Jahan looks up to see only gray, not sky, not storm, just the endless weight of winter pressing down. He gathers what he can, crooked limbs, broken twigs, bark that peels like scabs. He binds them with twine, and drapes them across the sled. It is not enough. It will never be enough. Still, he walks. A church bell sounds in the valley, slow, mournful, a mass, a burial. He cannot tell. Time is a blur in the cold. His mind fractures, flickering between memories and dread. Once, long ago, he had a brother. They sang at that church. Candles lit the stone arches like stars caught in a net. Now he carries one such candle in his pack, stolen from the abbey in the night, unlit, wrapped in cloth. It is for his daughter, not for prayer, but for vigil. If she dies before the fire returns, he will light it beside her, not to guide her soul, but to remember that she was ever warm. The snow deepens, his legs burn, the sled catches on a root and jerks sideways. He lets it fall, and then, smoke, thin, faint, but real. He sees it curling through the trees like a beckoning finger. The hut. His breath breaks into sobs. He runs now, slipping, stumbling, his boots dragging, and leaves the wood behind. Let the forest keep it. Let the cold have it. He has seen the smoke. That means fire. That means she is alive. He crashes through the final brush, and there it is, their crooked little hut, half covered in frost. And from its chimney, a thread of smoke dances upward like a miracle. He throws open the door. Inside, the stove glows faintly. She lies beside it, eyes closed, lips pale, but her chest moves. Slowly, shallowly, but it moves. Jahan drops to his knees. The cold slips off his back like a coat. He presses his hand to her forehead, burning, but not gone. He reaches into his pack, fingers trembling. The candle, he sets it near the stove, still unlit. Not yet. He stokes the fire with shaking hands, feeds it everything he has, twigs, bark, his own glove. Smoke thickens, sparks climb, the clay hisses, cracks, and then flame. A real flame. It dances, it sings. Jahan laughs, a sound like breaking ice, like a man who has lost too much, but not yet everything. His daughter coughs, turns, whispers something. He leans closer. Birds, she says, barely audible. In the roof, he listens. There above the rafters, in the thatch, the rustle of wings. Not vultures, not doves, just sparrows, nesting in the warmth, drawn to the last ember of life in this frozen world. Jahan closes his eyes. He remembers a story, one his mother told, before the pox took her, that sparrows were souls too small to be seen, carrying the breath of the dying up to God. He does not know if it is true, but he hopes. He sits beside his daughter, wraps her in his coat, and watches the fire grow. Outside, snow falls, thick and soundless. But in this small hut, light flickers, not bright, but enough to last the night. And far off, where the bell still tolls and the villagers huddle against the wind, a rumor begins, of a woodsman, who survived the worst winter in 20 years, of a man who stole light from a church to keep death at bay. Some say he made a pact with spirits, others say he was chosen. But Jahan knows the truth. He was not chosen. He simply refused to let the dark have her. Not yet, not tonight. And somewhere in that frost-bitten silence, the wings beat once more. A scream once echoed in this place. Long before her arrival, they say it belonged to a woman whose name was carved from the records, a penance too loud, too carnal, too remembered. Now only the wind carries it, through the ribs of cloister arches, and into the cloaked silence of stone. The novice kneels again, ink pools in her quill like blood waiting to be spilled. The candle before her flutters with indecision, its flame bowing low, casting shadows that dance like spirits across the script. She hides within scripture. The abbess's voice murmurs on, ancient syllables worn thin by time, Latin, bent through teeth, no longer young. Ave Maria, Gracia plena. But the novice does not hear her any more. Not truly, she writes. Not the psalm they assigned. Not the one to honor Margaret, martyr of chains. No what, she writes of rivers underground, of voices behind doors, of doves with their beaks broken on stained glass lies. She writes because it is the only part of her no one owns. Not her father, who traded her womb for peace. Not the church, who gave her God in exchange for silence. Not even the sister beside her, warm breath and colder eyes, who knows too much and says too little. The parchment is rough beneath her hand, flecked with the salt of old tears. The vellum is scraped from calfskin. Even innocence here must come from sacrifice. Outside, The rain claws the cloister garden like fingers at a coffin lid. Mud seeps up through the lavender roots. It smells of rot. It smells like death. They buried Sister Genevieve in that muck, under a slab of wet stone. She died moaning Latin, nonsense, or perhaps she saw something. A flame behind the veil. A secret not meant to outlive her. Before she passed she whispered something to the novice, words the others pretended not to hear. God sees even what the church hides. The novice had nodded, though her mouth was dry. That night she did not sleep. The candles burned too long, the shadows watched, and now, it is the eve of St. Margaret's feast. 3 days she's fasted, 3 days of stale water, cold cloth, and the rumble of a stomach louder than prayer, but it sharpens the mind, hunger. It scrapes clean the crust of obedience. They think her pious. They mistake quiet for submission. They do not know that her prayer tonight is not to God, but to Genevieve. She writes what she remembers, though she's forbidden to remember. The river behind her father's manor, where reeds whispered secrets, the hawk that died in her hands, chest pierced by an arrow, the warmth of her sister's palm the last time they touched, a sound. The abbess turns, only slightly, a flicker of suspicion, like a knife behind a curtain, but the novice meets her eyes, just once, not defiant, just steady, and in that silence, something ancient passes between them, not war, not peace, a recognition. The abbess nods, then turns back to her chanting. The candle weeps down to its final breath. The quill is empty, the parchment is full, and nowhere upon it is the name of God. A bell tolls, vespers. The sound rings like bones struck hollow. It echoes down the hallway where cloaks hang limp like corpses. It calls them, the daughters of dust, to kneel once more, to beg forgiveness they no longer remember earning. She rises, her knees crack like dry branches. She sways, the fast still gripping her spine. The parchment she leaves behind, centered on the table, unmarked, unclaimed, untouchable. Tomorrow it will be burned. They will gather in the courtyard, eyes blank, lips moving in memorized grief, and the parchment will catch like dry leaves. The flame will eat it with greedy light, but she will watch, and when the ash lifts, when the black dust scatters into morning wind, she will see wings, not dove wings, crow wings, and they will not mourn, they will fly. In the hallway, the other novices form a line, silent, pale. They smell of candle wax, soap, and old fabric. Their faces are nearly gone, stripped of the names they were born with, smoothed into obedience. But as she joins them, the sister beside her, the one whose breath she sometimes dreams of, brushes her fingers, just slightly. A gesture too small to punish, too large to forget, and in that fleeting touch, there is something real, not holy, not allowed, but real. The abbess leads them down the corridor. Torches flicker on the stone walls casting long shadows. Every flame reflects in the novice's eyes. Some hold fear, some faith, some fire. They walk into prayer, into ritual, into the rhythm of breath, and hunger, and silence. But behind one ribcage, beneath one habit, a heart beats slightly faster, not because of God, but because something is waking, not in the sky, not in the chapel, but in the self, something that cannot be sealed in parchment, something that will not burn. And outside, the rain slows, the garden stills, the mud holds secrets, the lavender leans toward the wind. Far beyond the convent walls, a raven circles, not lost, just watching, waiting, as all messengers must. The novice does not see it, not yet, but in her bones, she feels the sky shift, a tremor in the order of things, as if tomorrow's silence might finally break, and that perhaps, the next prayer she writes will not be in ink, but in flight. The market at Prague moaned like a wounded beast. Shouts collided like clashing blades, the bark of vendors, the creak of carts, the wet slap of fish against stone. Somewhere, A rooster crowed atop a butcher's stall, as though mocking the sun for rising late. The air stank of sweat, and salt, and rotting cabbage. Coin flickered in every pocket, but truth was cheap, and mercy cost more than most could afford. Through this fevered chaos, moved a young apothecary. His apron was dusted with ash, and tied with rope frayed by time and toil. At his hip clinked a pouch heavy with glass, tinctures and ground roots, wormwood and horn scraped from beasts long dead. His father once carried a fine ledger, each transaction inked with pride and precision. He carried none, only debts, and the ache of promises made to graves. He weaved through the crowd like a ghost, unnoticed until the scream cut the air like torn silk. It came from the square, sharp and high, a woman's voice, then a thud. People turned, briefly, but no one moved. A noble woman had collapsed, her silks, now wet with sweat, her veil tangled in her hair. Her servant knelt beside her, begging, pleading. His voice was raw. Please, someone help. But help had no patron here. The apothecary knelt, his knees pressed to the warm grimy stone. The woman's eyes fluttered, unfocused. One pupil had swallowed the iris, dark and full of secrets. The other was pale, unfixed, blind. He knew the signs. Belladonna, too much of the love potion. Again, her lips were cracked. He smelled iron, blood. He parted her jaw, and found her tongue black as coal. She was drowning in silence. Fetch vinegar, he whispered to the servant. But the man ran not for help, but from death, as if fear might outrun it. The apothecary did not move. Around him, the crowd watched like statues, their eyes dull, their feet firm. They stood behind an invisible wall made of terror and old superstitions. No one wished to touch what might already be lost. No one wanted the stain of death on their soul. From his satchel, he pulled a crushed clove, brown, bitter, fragrant. He bit into it, let the taste burn away doubt. His hands moved quick, pouring a cloudy tonic between the woman's lips. Her throat convulsed. She coughed. Once, was it enough? He didn't know. He never knew. The line between life and death was thinner than thread, and the science, if it was even that, leaned more on ghosts than gods. But she breathed, and in a world where breath was not guaranteed, that was enough for now. The sound of steel snapped the moment. A guard pushed through the throng, his boots loud, his hand gripping the hilt of his sword. He looked first to the woman, then to the man bent over her body. Witchery, he growled, suspicion heavy in his voice. The apothecary stood slowly and bowed. No, sir, he said, only balance. The guard squinted, searching for lies, but there was nothing to find. Only dark circles beneath tired eyes. Only hands that trembled from care, not guilt. After a long pause, the guard turned and disappeared back into the crowd. The noble woman slept, and for the first time in days, the apothecary exhaled. His shoulders dropped like weights had been cut loose. Not victory, just a moment's peace. A tug at his sleeve pulled him back. It was a beggar boy, cheeks hollow, eyes too old for his years. He looked up, voice barely more than breath. You saved her. The apothecary smiled. The first time in weeks. It did not reach his eyes, but it was real. Enough. Around them the world forgot. Pigs squealed. Bread changed hands. A juggler tossed burning sticks into the sky. Coins clanged in cups, and mouths cursed at spoiled fruit. The market resumed as if nothing had shifted, as if a soul had not dangled over the edge and been yanked back by the frayed string of luck and cloves. But beneath the apothecary's feet, the stone trembled, not in a way seen, but felt, like a pulse in the earth, or a truth long buried, and beginning to rise. He knew that tremor. It lived in the cracks of cities, and the hearts of men who sold gods by the bottle. It whispered in alleyways, and echoed in cathedrals. It said, the balance is tipping. Later, when he sat alone in his corner shop, He would open the pouch and count the vials he had used. He would mark the missing ones not with ink, but with silence, knowing each was a thread pulled from a fragile tapestry. He would sleep lightly, if at all, and dream of black tongues and blind eyes, of a crowd frozen by fear, and a boy's quiet gratitude. The city didn't care. The city never did, but it remembered in small ways, in the eyes that followed him a little longer, in the coins dropped into his palm without haggle, in the soft knock of a stranger at dusk, asking for something unnamed. He had given balance, but balance was not peace, and the woman, the noble woman, would wake in a day, or not at all. If she did, she would not remember his face, only the burning in her throat, and the shadows that clung to her as she slept. Her husband would scold, her priest would bless, her apothecary would be another man in another crowd, but the earth would remember, the stone, the blood, the breath, and in that memory, something ancient stirred, something that would not stay buried, because in Prague, as in all cities, fat on coin and superstition, the line between healer and heretic was a hair's width thick, and every step forward was a gamble, every remedy a risk, every cure a question. And the apothecary, he moved on, not with pride, not with fear, but with the quiet certainty of a man who walked a bridge no one else could see, suspended over fire on one side, and ice on the other. Behind him, the market roared. Ahead, a new silence waited, cloaked in ash and smoke, whispering of trials yet to come. And somewhere in that silence, something darker began to breathe. A shriek cut across the bare morning hills, not human, not beast, just the sound of wind forced through broken stone. The pilgrim stood still for a moment, listening. Beneath his feet, frost snapped the edges of dead grass. His toes, raw and swollen inside, cracked leather, pulsed with every heartbeat. He closed his eyes, counted 3 breaths, then walked on. Each step pulled a thread from the past, a penance unraveling slowly in the dirt behind him. He did not know how many days had passed. The sun rose and fell like a tolling bell, and each night brought him closer to something unnamed. He had long stopped measuring time by stars or wounds. Now he measured only by silence, and in silence, he carried everything. The psalter he clutched had once belonged to his mother. Its leather was scuffed smooth with years of prayer. Pages curled at the corners like leaves in drought. Sometimes, when the hunger made his thoughts blur and his knees tremble, he pressed his lips to the binding, not in faith, but memory, of hands that once turned those pages, of lullabies, whispered in Latin beneath candlelight. Ahead, the sky bruised with storm, purple clouds gathered like monks in mourning. The pilgrim adjusted his cloak, a threadbare thing patched with the cloth of old tunics, old flags, maybe even old sins. Rain would come. It always did. He did not fear it. The road bent southward into a wooded hollow. Pines crowded the path like sentinels, and their scent was sharp, almost holy. There, in the hush of moss and snow, time thinned. He felt it pressing against him, not as a threat, but as a witness, the kind that watches but does not intervene. At the bend, the woman was waiting. She stood by a broken milestone, her head bowed, a gray veil wrapped against the cold. He had seen her the day before, passing, pausing, vanishing in the folds of mist. He had thought she was an echo, but now, she was real. Their eyes met, neither spoke. She turned, walked on. He followed. For hours, they said nothing. Their footfalls formed a rhythm, soft thuds on mud, the occasional splash where stream crossed path. Once a fox darted out, red fur flashing like blood against snow. The woman did not flinch. The pilgrim barely blinked. They were too far inside themselves for surprises. By late afternoon, they reached the remains of an aqueduct. Its ribs jutted from the hillside, like the spine of a long-dead beast. Beneath it, a dry archway gave shelter from the wind. They did not ask permission. Pilgrims never did. He unwrapped his pouch, 2 chunks of salted rye, hardened, but edible.
He broke one and offered it. She accepted without words. They ate in silence, chewing slowly, like monks during Lent. In the shadows, a rat watched with eyes like beads of onyx. As night fell, the cold crept in. He lay on his side, cloak tight, psalter beneath his head like a stone pillow. His staff rested beside him, carved notched by notched, each marking a memory, or a loss. The woman remained upright for a long while. She stared out into the dark, where stars blinked behind clouds. When she finally lay down, their shoulders touched, warmth shared, nothing more, and then, just before sleep pulled him under, he whispered, voice dry as dust, peace, a single word, broken vow, earned, maybe. She did not speak, but her fingers found his, and held them. Dawn. A crow called from the ridge above. The storm had passed. Snow dusted the ground in thin, reluctant sheets. The aqueduct shimmered in pale gold, half sacred in its ruin. They stood and walked without ceremony. Miles later, the woman paused. They were near a fork in the path. One led toward the coast, toward pilgrimage sites and safety. The other, southward, through rougher terrain, toward Rome, toward blood and bones and redemption. She looked at him, eyes unreadable, beneath her veil. He waited, without a word. She stepped left, toward the sea, her choice, her path. He bowed his head in respect. She touched her fingers briefly to her chest, then disappeared into the trees. He turned south. The road rose sharply now, flanked by bare hills where grass withered beneath stone. The wind returned, stronger this time, dragging the smell of ash. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolled, low and uncertain, like a memory struggling to surface. By noon, he reached the gallows. It stood alone, just as he remembered. No rope, just a beam, weather-worn, and a single crow perched atop. It watched him again, same eyes, same silence, as if it remembered too. He bowed slightly, respect again, always, and then he passed. Further on, the path narrowed, rocks jutted like broken teeth. The sky dimmed, not with cloud, but something else, a weight, as if the earth remembered too much. His feet bled freely now, blisters torn open, flesh rubbed raw, but he did not slow. Pain was part of it, pain was necessary. He thought of the boy again, smoke, bells, a face half forgotten, half imagined, eyes like his own, or maybe not, a son, a brother, a ghost. He did not know any more, only that the boy had smiled once, and then silence. That smile was worth the road. The psalter trembled in his hands as he walked, not from cold, but something deeper, the way a flame trembles when it remembers wind. He crested the final hill before the plains, and there stretched before him like parchment, was the road to Rome. He could not see the city yet, but he felt it, in the bones, in the ash, in the pull of gravity that whispered, almost. He stood there for a moment, alone, against the sky, and then he walked on. Behind him, the crow cried once. Ahead, in the far haze, something flickered, not quite light, not quite shadow, just enough to keep going.
A low wind creeps through the chimney stones, curling around the infant's linen wrap like a breath not yet claimed. In the flicker of candlelight, shadows sway across the walls, tall, thin, flickering like penitence before judgment. The room holds its silence, heavy and holy, broken only by the soft suckle of a newborn's lips and the distant clang of a church bell counting out the hour. One chime, then another. The washerwoman lies still now, her body slack with agony spent, her hair damp and plastered to her temples. Her eyes, ringed in exhaustion, never leave the child. Her fingers twitch toward him like roots groping for water. She doesn't yet speak, only breathes, as if the act itself is a fragile contract with survival. The midwife sits beside her, spine curved with the weight of too many winters. She leans close, her breath smelling of boiled herbs and fatigue. He lives, she says softly. And so do you. The girl closes her eyes. A tear escapes the corner, quiet, unannounced. The candle by the Madonna burns low, its wax pools in a slow, deliberate melt. The driftwood virgin above them watches, her face smooth and unreadable, a symbol carved from tide and salt and prayer. Her silence fills the room more than words ever could, and then, another knock. Not hesitant this time, not polite. 3 hard raps. The midwife freezes, her fingers still stained red. Her eyes snap to the girl, to the boy, to the barred door. Outside, a cough echoes, a man's voice, muffled, wet with sickness, pleads. "Let me in," he rasps. "For pity's sake, my wife's gone cold." The girl clutches her child closer. Her lips press against his skull. The midwife does not move. She knows the sound of dying men. She's heard it in the trenches of childbirth, in plague years past, in harvest seasons gone wrong. The door remains shut. The man coughs again, then silence. A moment later, footsteps stagger away. The midwife rises slowly and adds another log to the fire. It spits and hisses, defiant. The warmth is thin, barely enough to push back the cold pressing at the window panes. Frost thickens there, tracing skeletal trees and thorny crowns. She turns back to the mother. He must feed. The girl nods, teeth clenched against pain, and shifts her gown aside. The boy latches hungrily. A new life drawing strength from what remains. The act is simple, sacred, violent in its vulnerability. Outside, the sounds of the street begin to dim. London itself holds its breath. Word of fever spreads faster than fire. Doors are shuttered, shutters barred. Smoke curls upward into a sky the color of old iron. Somewhere, a bell tolls again, this time for the dead. Inside, the room contracts into a world of 4 walls and 1 prayer. The midwife kneels again before the shrine. Her knees crack as they touch stone. She lights a second taper. Her lips move without sound. Keep them safe. Take no more tonight. The child hiccups. The washerwoman shifts, trying not to cry again. Her eyes are swollen, red-rimmed, but locked on that fragile chest rising and falling. She does not yet know how she'll feed him next week. She does not yet know the name of his father. All she knows is breath, warmth, and the pulse of something inside her that refuses to die. The midwife watches her for a moment longer. Then she begins to clean, washing rags in a chipped basin, scrubbing blood from the floor, with hands that have done this too many times. The scent of lavender is gone now. Only iron and smoke remain. By the hearth, the child gurgles. A soft sound, like wind curling under a church door. Outside, another knock. This one lighter, almost apologetic. The midwife does not rise. She calls out instead. "We've no sickness here. Be gone." A woman's voice answers. "I know, I've brought broth for the girl." A pause. "Then I lost mine too." The midwife looks to the girl, who gives the faintest nod. Slowly, the midwife lifts the bar. The woman outside is wrapped in shawls, eyes sunken, hands trembling. She holds a pot of broth that steams in the night. Her breath fogs as she steps inside, offering no smile. "I won't stay," she says. "Just thought she'd need it." The midwife takes the pot, nods once. No thanks spoken, just eyes meeting in a silence that recognizes pain. Then the woman turns and disappears into the frost. The door is barred once more. The girl takes the broth with shaking hands. It smells of bone and barley and rosemary, too thin to nourish, but warm enough to remind her of days before hunger. As she drinks, the boy stirs, his eyes still bleary with newness, blink open for the first time. They are gray, like storm clouds over the Thames. The midwife sits beside them. She brushes a finger against his cheek. "What will you call him?" she asks. The girl hesitates. Her lips part, then close again. She swallows. "Thomas," she says finally. The name hangs in the air, soft and round, like a cradle song half remembered. The midwife nods. "Thomas." She whispers it to the shrine, to the Virgin, to the bones of her own long-buried children. And then, as if the name has power, the wind begins to howl. The fire flares, casting a sudden spray of sparks. The shadows leap and retreat. The room tightens, Down the lane, screams rise. Not fevered, but angry. Steel strikes stone. A dog howls. The midwife moves to the window, peering past the frost. She sees torches. Red light against the white of winter. Men in livery. A banner flapping. The king's seal. Raids, she murmurs. Quarantine's not enough. A door slams in the distance. Hooves thunder. Someone shouts. She turns back to the girl. Keep him hidden, she says. Whatever comes next, don't let them take him. The washerwoman's face hardens. She nods once, and the boy Thomas blinks again. Not crying, just watching. The candle by the Madonna flickers low, casting the Virgin's face into shadow. Her expression seems to change in the light, less blank now, more mournful. Or maybe it's just the eyes of a weary woman, searching for meaning where there is none. The midwife settles onto her stool, hands folded in her lap. The night presses closer. In the hush between screams, a question lingers. What kind of world have we delivered him into? And outside, the city waits, cold, coughing, armed. The next chapter, already pounding at the door. A single drop of water slides down the stained glass like a tear, then another, then dozens, chasing each other across the colored panes as the storm pounds the chapel roof like a drumbeat for the damned. Below on the cold stone floor, a knight kneels, barefoot, bloodied, broken. No heraldry, no shield, no songs, only the echo of his breath in the silence of God's house. He is a man without armor, but not unburdened. His sword rests across the altar, chipped, dull, not cared for in months. The leather grip is worn smooth by sweat and war. It is not a weapon now, it is a relic, a witness, a tombstone for the man he used to be. The rain slaps the stained glass. The pigeon flutters wildly above, its wings slicing the silence. Each time it hits the beams, it startles the night, as if the sound might be another scream from the village, another cry in the night. But it's just a bird, lost, like him. He murmurs under his breath, Norman French barely audible over the storm. Pour les flames, pour les cris, pour si que je n'ai pas empêché. For the flames, for the screams, for what I did not stop. His voice cracks. He is 30, though his body shivers, like a man twice his age. The blood on his tunic has already darkened. Not his, a child's maybe, or a farmer's. Does it matter? It stains just the same. Behind him, a monk watches in silence, the cowl of his robe shadowing his face. He holds no book, speaks no prayer. The chapel is beyond words tonight. Some nights, only silence fits. The knight's fingers grip the rosary, bone-white knuckles, tendons tight as bowstrings. He does not count the beads. He does not even pray. He holds it like a drowning man, clutching a rock, not for salvation, for weight, for proof that something still exists in his hands besides death. Outside, the war grinds on. Fires light the hills beyond. The wind carries distant horns and closer screams. But within these walls, time curls into itself. No hours, no orders, just stone, and storm and the ache of remembering. The monk steps forward, offering a crust of bread and watered wine. The knight does not move. The bread trembles in the monk's hand. He places it beside him and retreats. The knight does not thank him. He cannot speak now without unraveling. He does not eat. His stomach is a hollow grave. Instead he reaches for the sword and lifts it, gently, with both hands, like a relic from a shattered saint. He presses his lips to the steel, not to bless it, not in triumph, but in mourning, as if this blade, this broken edge, were the only thing left that knew his name. In his saddlebag, beneath a sodden cloak, lies a letter, sealed once in wax, now washed away, addressed to a mother buried under Norman stone years before. It speaks of glory, of victories, of songs sung by campfires and roses sent by queens, lies, all of it. If he wrote it again, it would be in ash, in rain, in the smell of smoke, and the faces of villagers, who looked at him not with fear, but with understanding, as if they knew he was already haunted. He had thought confession might offer relief, But this was no confession. This was a reckoning. He is not seeking forgiveness. He does not believe in it anymore. He is only trying not to forget. The pigeon beats against the rafters again. The night watches it. Its wings are cut by the wooden beams, again and again, yet it does not stop. It does not fall. Something in that endless struggle feels holy, or cruel. He cannot decide. He closes his eyes. He sees fire, not on a battlefield, but in a cottage, straw roof blazing. A woman's scream split in two, a boy running through smoke with a stick in his hand, pretending it's a sword, his own soldiers laughing, one of them pushing the boy down. The boy did not rise. The knight opens his eyes. The rosary is cutting into his palm. Blood from his cracked skin mixes with the wood beads. He loosens his grip. There had been a time he thought the war would make him eternal, that deeds however dark would echo in stone and song, but now he sees eternity differently, as a long cold silence in a chapel, with only birds and ghosts for company. The bell tolls midnight. Its sound folds through the chapel like a curtain being drawn. The monk stands, begins his slow walk to the choir for prayer, but the knight does not rise. He stays kneeling, stone pressing into his knees, the sword still across the altar, his lips still trembling from the steel. A drop of water lands on the parchment beside him. The letter, he picks it up. His eyes scan the elegant script, the words of pride, the bravado. He tears it in half. Then again, until the words are nothing but soaked shreds in his blood-stained hand. He whispers not a prayer, but a question. If I die tomorrow, will the screams still follow? He looks up. The pigeon has stopped flying. It perches now on the edge of a beam, chest heaving, wings limp, watching him, silent. The monk does not turn around. He knows the knight will not join the prayer. Not tonight, perhaps not ever again. Outside, thunder rolls. Inside, the sword remains on the altar, but in the knight's eyes, a single tear falls, not of sorrow, but of knowing. The war is not out there anymore. It lives in him now, and somewhere down the road, a choice awaits, not between victory and defeat, but between silence and truth. The knight lowers his head once more. Rain taps on the roof like distant drums calling him forward, and in the dark, the next story begins to stir, with hooves on wet stone, and a rider carrying news that will change everything.